Welcome back aboard Arabella, where the boat work continues on a mooring in Marion, Massachusetts. Last week, some repairs and upgrades were made on deck, and this week there's a project in the cockpit that Steve has had planned for quite a while.
Today is going to be an Arabella Demolition day. We're going to start taking things apart. I want to move the control panel here for the motor up onto the nav on deck. I want to switch the 12-inch chart plotter down below with the 10-inch chart plotter on deck and put the bigger one up there. And we've got to get the Pelagic and the Garmin auto helm stuff switched out so that we have a working auto helm and we can take the rudder feedback sensor off and throw that thing in the garbage. Moving this panel up onto the housetop is something that came pretty highly recommended when we first built the boat, and in hindsight probably should have. We had the electrical issues with some connections on this when we started our journey south and ended up in Newport for a little while. And it's also just kind of a pain to always be looking back to check on the temperature and the oil pressure. So this way, having it up on the deck will keep all that nav stuff in one place. It'll keep it undercover. I'm gonna leave the throttle and the shifter here. I think it's a great spot for it. It works really well. And we're gonna turn the front of this into a little bit of cubby space, which we could use more of in the cockpit anyways. This has been our on-deck nav. And when I built this, I tried to keep it as compact as possible because I didn't want it to block visibility. But when I built this, we didn't have the travel in there, we didn't have the hatch, the door aid and the housetop there. We certainly didn't have Victoria sitting upside down on the housetop. I knew we were gonna do the Dodger and I didn't want to impede with that. So I kept this kind of as small and as tight as we possibly could keep it. But we can absolutely come all the way over to the support for the Dodger. We can go a little bit more towards center. And if we do that and keep the height a little bit flatter, we'll definitely have room to tuck a 12-inch chart plotter down here in the corner. So that is the plan. We can get rid of the Garmin remote because now we have a tiny little Pelagic one. It's much simpler. And we also need to mount this box for the Pelagic auto helm. So we got to fit this in there somewhere. And we also have to fit the engine panel up in here and still keep this kind of as small and compact as we can. So first step, just take everything apart. And then tomorrow the wind should be less and the rest of the week looks to be some great weather. So we should be able to get this rebuilt over the next few days. Today is not a day to try to build things. Today is a take things apart kind of day. Back in the engine area, and these are the connections that we took the plugs out and hardwired them when we were in Newport. And I didn't bother heat shrinking them at the time because I knew this was all going to come apart again because I've had the plan to move the deck nav for a while. And what I'd like to do on this end down here is hook these all up to a kind of bus bar system so that you can just have ring terminals on them and unscrew them instead of cutting and crimping anytime this wire needs to get moved or if the engine needs to get unhooked or something. So thankfully, I can just go through and cut these because they all have numbers or colors. So that one's 1, 0, that one's 1, that one's 2. If these weren't so well labeled, I would be labeling them right now before we cut, but it all looks good, so it should be fine. I need to joint the edge of this cherry here. So I have it clamped on a board that I'm sure is flat. Both of these are recently planed. It's clamped down to the bench. And this side here, this board, this bottom one, is set out a little bit. So I have an overhang on this side. And that lets me run my plane down the side and use the junction with the bench and the board to keep me that 90. So the corner of the plane is 90. And I need this board on the bottom because, as you can see, my plane blade doesn't come all the way to the edge. So I need something underneath there to float that up a little bit, and I can't be taller than the blade. So there we are, we got plenty of room. We'll run this down a few times and see if we can get this straight. Nice, that looks good. I need to add just a little bit to the corner on both of these boards for this to work for the nav. So I'm going to use some of this Total Boat Total Bond because we're just adding a tiny little piece and it's not structural. And this is a lot easier than busting out a tube of epoxy. Under here, some clamps in the bench dogs. I got a stop in the back here. Snug that up. Lay these over the top. Cool. Let's let that dry for a while. I could 100% do this on the workbench on the boat, but Robin is on work calls right now, and me banging away would be a little bit obtrusive to her. And I don't have to worry so much about a mess here, because it's a shop. So while we have a calm anchorage, while we have access to the shop here, let's see if we can finish getting this on-deck nav made up. Right now I'm cutting the box joints. I roughed them out on the bandsaw, which is also a little quicker than doing it by hand. Now I'm squaring them up. So I have an offcut of cherry here on the bottom, which is sacrificial, so that I'm not chewing up the workbench here. You can see it's in pretty good shape. I don't want to be dinging it up on them. And then I have another board clamped across the top that's my straight edge. So that's giving me a nice line and keeping me vertical. And I find a little chisel is handy to get in the very corners. Box joints have a lot in common with dovetails. One of those things is you cut the tails or you cut the pins, then you cut the pins or you cut the tails. And everyone's got an opinion of whether you cut pins first or tails first. In a box joint, they're all pins and all tails, doesn't really matter. So I did the long one first, and now I'm doing the two sides. If I mess up on one of these, I can just change the pins a little bit. And if it's a tiny bit, you'll never even notice. If it's a lot, I can make them all the same. But when I do this one, I've got to get this right so that these fit nice and snug. And if I overcut on this one, you're gonna see it, and I don't have another side to make up on it with. So having it in the small side, it's less catastrophic if I mess this up, and there's a better chance of me being able to replace this than the big one. So in this instance, I like doing big one first. Before I can mount the new nav box, I took the putty knife here and scraped off all the old adhesive. And the new one's gonna land right where this one was, but it's gonna extend farther. These are gonna be hidden in the box, so I'm not gonna worry about painting and making this pretty. You're not gonna see it, but what I do wanna do is make sure that these holes get filled. Just make a little bit of a chamfer. Clean a little bit of the gunk out of there. Structurally, this is no big issue. I just want to make sure we're not getting water intrusion. Now you could fill these with epoxy, would be a good choice. But I'm a little pressed for time, so we're going to use some Total Bond instant adhesive. And we use the thin so that it goes down in there, and we're just going to fill this up. Let's scrape off any excess. And then I'm going to use some accelerator here. And that instantly cures. cable, network cable. So a little NEMA cable here, and this is just going to go from the chart plotter over to our backbone here. This one will be for the GMI 20. Okay. Well, this looks a little rat nesty, but this is our line coming from the deck. And then I put in these terminal blocks instead of the butt connectors so that you can easily unhook the wiring harness from the engine from the wire going up to the nav. These ones aren't used, so I put some push connectors on them, just kind of bundled them up, tucked them off to the side. And then they didn't leave a lot of room with the wiring harness here. So I've got a couple little zip ties here. They're just holding that over so that there's not a lot of tension on these wires. And I'll have to check these, make sure these don't come off, because some of them are a wee bit tighter than I would like. Really small little section of wires here, not much. So let's go up on deck and go see if the engine fires up, because these are all the connections. Oh, I hope all the connections are good. Let's find out. Oh, it's a good sign. Woohoo!
Last week, Steve changed out the line in the Deadeyes for heat-set Dyneema. This week, he was ready to tighten up the rig, one step closer to being able to use his new Code Zero from Doyle Sales.
All right, that's as loose as it's gonna get.
Okay.
Robin and I got these as tight as we could and then left for a couple days to Granby and came back, and they had loosened up a little bit, which I expected because the splices need to settle in. So it takes a little bit of time for that sheath to fully snug in over the core and for all of that just to settle into place. We just yarded on them again this morning, and they are tighter than they have ever been. And that's with the head stays loose. So once we tighten up the head stays, these are gonna tighten up even a little bit more. And I'm pretty pumped with how this is shaken up so far. So these shouldn't stretch, they should hold the tension. And I'm not at all worried about pulling these just about as tight as we possibly can and stressing the rig or the hull. She certainly could take a lot more than this, and if you put turnbuckles on here, you'd be able to crank them even tighter. The one thing we do want to be conscientious of is that it's a gaff rig, so there's no spreaders and there's nothing to help support kind of the middle of the mast. So in theory, we could crank these tight enough to start to bow the mast and cause problems, but we're not going to get them that tight. This is great. So now I got to go up and tighten up the jib, and then we can do the staysail, and then we can start installing the new sail, which I am so excited for. I can't wait to go out on a 8 or 10 knot day and be able to go really make some miles. It could be a huge difference, but we can't get that rigged until we finish up this. These are the splices that need to settle. So it goes from here all the way down. And the splice kind of ends somewhere in the deadeye. So that whole length needs to just cinch up and settle in. But this is nice and tight. Now, some of you might be wondering about this angle and probably believing it should be a bit longer to reduce the loads. And you're right, it would reduce the loads a bit, but you need to remember that one strand of this Dyneema is stronger than our 3/8 galvanized wire that's in our shrouds. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strands basically holding that. So this is not even remotely close to capacity. So having that be a little bit higher loads and having it be a little bit closer to the deadeye, I don't think is going to create any issues. All right, I think that is just about the straightest we've ever had that stay. I'll snug this up a little bit more, but this is looking really good. These pins are really important. They keep the turnbuckle from opening.
Next week, Arabella gets on the move again, through Cape Cod Canal to Provincetown. And then Steve and Robin sit down to reveal the big plan for Canada and where they hope to spend the winter this year. And lastly, thank you to everyone who donated to my ride in the Pan Mass Challenge coming up in just a couple of weeks. You can still donate to fight cancer and support research at Dana-Farber by going to the link on the screen and in the video description. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you back here again next Friday.